I'm Trevor Babb with the Contemporary Guitar Blog, and today my special guest is Sam Wilson, joining me from Nova Scotia. She's a jazz guitarist who has just released a new album called Into the Heart Part 2, and she has received Jazz Recording of the Year nominations from the Nova Scotia Music Awards and East Coast Music Awards as well in Canada. Sam, thank you so much for sitting down and talking about this new record with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool. So, it's called Into the Heart Part 2. And so maybe we need to talk a little bit about Part 1 before we get to Part 2. Um, this is a 2017 EP, Part 1 was. And so talk a little bit about kind of how that project came about. And also, just kind of what you were trying to do with that recording, a number of your other recordings or with jazz combos. And so we're looking at a solo guitar record. What led to trying to communicate your music as a solo artist?
Yeah, so that EP came like 2 years after I graduated from studying music at school. And after going through the academic route, I was pretty burnt out and I kind of took off to Canmore and didn't play guitar for about 8 months. And then after I felt less burnt out, I returned to Nova Scotia. And because I hadn't been playing with anybody, um, I just started focusing on playing by myself because I didn't know many people in the scene around here. And um, I found it, yeah, creating that solo music, I didn't like attach anything to it. I just created it and it felt fun and enjoyable. And yeah, I was kind of trying to find that muse again
Mm,
after intensely trying to be this level for school. And yeah, and then it kind of came in a culmination of like other life events, and it was just very cathartic to play and write. And I figured that I needed something that could, like, I could use as like, want to play together. This is kind of
mm,
what I could do, and use that EP to apply for money to record a full band album.
yeah.
So
The
after the
classic musician using the CD recording as a really expensive business card, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, basically.
great.
That's basically what it was.
And so, to what degree has the music on your solo material, to what degree has that kind of translated into works with larger ensembles? Have you tried to take any of these tunes and make them work with more people, or do you envision this music as like just solo guitar stuff, or has it had a life beyond just you and your guitar at all?
I've never, yeah, I haven't considered doing that with it actually. Um, I would say it influences because, like, after that EP, I wrote an album for a quintet, so two horns,
Mm-hmm.
guitar, bass, drums. And I would just say the only what kind of transferred to that is some like melodicism
Mm,
and just the way that I transition from one part to another, maybe, but it wasn't intentional. It's just kind of me.
yeah. And
But yeah, I
so,
haven't, yeah. I just think
yeah.
it's solo guitar music. If someone was like, could you arrange this for that? Maybe I would entertain that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, in a lot of ways, it looks like part two is really like an expansion upon part one. You have a number of tunes that were on part one that are now on part two. Let's talk about those tracks that overlap between the EP and the full length.
Yeah.
And to what degree did those tracks that you recorded 3 years ago, 4 years ago, um, you re-recorded them for the full length, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how did those pieces evolve, if at all, over the last 3 or 4 years between recording the EP and then moving on to the full length? Did those change a lot? Talk a little bit about just their life beyond, between the two releases.
Yeah, I would say if anything, they just got, um, like, more under my fingers from playing them more, and, like, the form and maybe tempo slightly changed for them, but I didn't so that part 2 was actually a request. It was, like, a Japanese label, uh, was pitched my full band album, but then they through that found my EP and said, "Actually, we like this more.
Hmm.
Could you add to it?" So I wasn't even asked to re-record it. They would have just been fine with me um, using the old ones, but I decided on my own that I just wanted to re-record it. So with that in mind, I didn't want to like change them too much because they were asking for that and an extension of it,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
What
yeah.
attracted you to working with this Japanese label? What
Um,
what made you reach out to them?
well, actually, my I didn't reach out to them. My
Hmm.
publisher reached out to them.
Okay.
Yeah, and apparent according to him, there's still a market for uh, like jazz over there.
Okay.
Yeah, they still a lot of people listen to it, and they, according to him, I haven't personally talked to anybody, but
Hmm.
they appreciate instrumental music,
It
and yeah,
maybe like a growing um market for jazz internationally, you think?
yeah,
Or
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about your writing process. These pieces, tracks, whatever you want to call them, they are not your typical jazz structure of like head and solos and head. I don't hear a lot of like improvised soloing on the record, which, on your full band album, you show that you can totally do.
yeah,
So let's talk a little bit about your writing process and the role of improvisation, if there's any in these pieces, if improvisation is part of the way that you write them. What does that look like for a jazz guitarist who's um, writing music like this?
yeah. So when I'm writing them, it's coming from improv.
Yeah.
Like I'm just kind of noodling around, and then I'll find a riff or something that I like, and then I'll be like, oh, where can I take that? So it's like a form of slow improvisation.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, you said jazz guitarist, but which lots of people have called me, but I've never actually. Um, yeah, I'm kind of coming around to that term being like maybe that's not actually what I do.
Hmm.
So
Well,
yeah,
I know
because
there
it
was one
is.
time we played together and it was
Yeah,
definitely not jazz.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's like I'm a guitarist, but people
Right.
want more. And although on this new record I did record 3 standards and there is
Okay.
improvisation in there,
Yeah.
and on some of the pieces, like I would say the kind of what happens is like I know there's this section and this section and this section, and then how I put them together changes sometimes
Hmm.
if I'm performing it live. So like the in terms of form, the form is fluid.
Yeah.
Um, and then on some of them, there's like hurry up and wait. There's little fills that are improvised,
Mm-hmm.
or railway spine. There's little fills that are improvised. So it's just more on a much smaller scale
Yeah.
than
A
your
lot more
typical like
selective.
solo. Yeah,
You mentioned your just a guitarist, not even necessarily comfortable with the label jazz guitarist.
Yeah.
Um, Talk a little bit more about your musical training and different experiences that you've had playing in different kinds of formats, and how that has kind of those that amalgamation of experiences has really whittled down who you are as a musician on this particular release.
Yeah. So I actually started when I started playing guitar, it was all kind of acoustic music, and I tried classical for a minute, but it was way too specific for me. I was like, this, I can't
Mm-hmm.
do this at that time. I've since dabbled in classical. And then I went to jazz school and was totally unprepared and not at the level I think I should have been at. So it was this like huge catch up game. And I think from that, uh, yeah, just, I always felt like I was kind of like not quite making it, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense, but um, although I graduated and like did all the things you're supposed to do or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and then, yeah, I didn't really love playing like bebop, and I was more drawn to like, I guess, hard bop or more modern stuff. And like, um, towards the end of that experience of studying and playing different um, pieces from different eras of the jazz continuum.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that resulted in a break. And then trying to refine myself, kind of, I feel like it combined that pre existing acoustic world with what I had worked on for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest part of it that I like love is the improvisation, the composition part. Because to me, composition is just like slow improvisation almost.
Yeah.
And the harmony, like the rich harmony that exists in jazz music. And from that acoustic beginner era, I did a lot of like right hand work.
Mm.
So on all these solo pieces, it's like kind of this mishmash, and a lot of it is like right hand work, and I'll have some tapping in there. I don't know if you can tell that from listening to it, but
Yeah, I didn't think I heard any tapping when I listened to this
yeah,
album, so it's pretty slick that you're doing that, and it's not something that is apparent to me that that's what you're doing.
yeah, yeah. And then yeah, I really like love jazz, and uh, but I love other kinds of music. And part of it is that I had a closed mindset of what that meant, because I kind of got stuck in that box that sometimes you get in from school.
Mm.
And it was like, jazz has to be this,
Yeah.
or the jazz police are going to come after you. Um,
Everybody has their own idea about what jazz is,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. And then, um, yeah, I just like sought out other experiences, but it just kept coming back to jazz. Like I would kind of do this like circle thing. Yeah, like the solo thing, and then playing lots of duo, and then writing the full band album, then doing like Amy Brandon's 21st Century Guitar Conference and playing all those pieces. That was like really like mind opening for me. I was like,
Mm-hmm. Well,
cool,
yeah,
that,
that was all kinds of weird music,
yeah,
like
and I
great weird
loved it.
music, great
Yeah,
weird music.
yeah. And then I also did Jerry Granelli's creative music workshop, which kind of also just opened my mind a bit more. And then I went to the Banff Center for the Arts in 2019 and the two guest artists were jazz, or I guess one, she called herself an improviser. And then the saxophonist Philip Greenleaf, he came from that like jazz continuum and plays improvised music and the new music, so like more avant-garde. And I really kind of got a really good introduction from him into that, and like finally met somebody that was embodying what he was talking about, and like kind of played at a more, it was more like it seems to me like spiritual to him than about, I don't know, some of the other stuff
Hmm.
that people play for. And yeah, that I was like, that's where I want to go. Like I want to get to that point of like freedom in playing rather than fear in playing.
Hmm.
And yeah, so now I'm just continuing to try to, yeah, and then on top of that, the Black Lives Matter movement happening this past year really made me reflect on my relationship to Black music,
Mm-hmm.
and like how am I um, honoring the roots of that music and not just like using it,
Yeah.
um, for for me. Like, yeah, that was like a big, kind of a big uh, pause. It was like I need to, yeah, it just really made me more conscious of going back and learning more of the history, doing more listening. If I'm going to learn a tune, I'm going to learn it by ear, um, not take the shortcuts and really
Yeah.
embody it. And yeah, if I'm going to play it, I'm going to be clear on why I'm playing it.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, and yeah. So yeah, I'm still, I feel like I'm in this like still figuring it out phase. Like it's just constantly kind of shifting. And I don't really, yeah. The the solo thing though is just supernatural, and I'm not really like trying too hard with it.
And you have some very
Yeah.
evocative titles here. Let's talk about a few of those. Where are some of these titles coming from?
So Goodbye August, when I returned to Nova Scotia, um, I had lost my mom about a year
Hmm.
prior to that, to like writing that song, and I was staying on a friend's farm to just kind of uh like technology detox. It's something that I
Hmm.
do a lot. And yeah, and it was literally just coming to the end of the summer, and it was like, here's a little kind of like thank you, goodbye summer, peace,
Hmm.
goodbye August. And then Airport Contemplation, I wrote that when I was waiting in an airport for a flight. And I have a travel guitar, and I was just kind of quietly in the corner, and then this lady came up to me and she was like, "Oh, can I listen?" And I was like,
Hmm.
"Sure." And she was like very what's the word? I guess outgoing. Like she was wearing all purple and her hair was dyed purple, and like she had just come back from some journey.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and was very like, I was supposed to meet you kind of thing, and
Hmm.
kind of just spilled her life story to me in the airport. And afterwards, I was just like kind of processing that whole interaction and came up with that song. So
Interesting.
it's usually, yeah, while I'm kind of processing something, I'll be noodling on the guitar, and then it kind of leads to these things. Hurry Up and Wait was something that I just, sometimes I'll just be thinking, and or like, you know, you're on a bus and you're just have like nothing to do but like look out the window, and you're like, it was kind of like, oh wow, we're all like hurrying up to just wait. Like, why are we all rushing around.
Yeah, that title sounds like something you might have written when you showed up to a rehearsal and
Yeah,
something wasn't plugged in and you're noodling around, right?
yeah, and you're just like, why are we hurrying up to just
Hmm.
yeah, they're all just, like, really sometimes I'll write stuff in my phone, like, something will come in my head, and then I'm like, "Oh, I wanna write a piece to that word," like railway spine, that came
Mm.
before the song.
So
Um,
sometimes you just hear a phrase
yeah,
that you're like, that's a title for a tune,
yeah,
and then the tune comes later.
yeah,
And sometimes you're in a situation where you're messing around on the instrument and you come up with something that's good, and then the title comes from the situation where that music came to you.
yeah.
Let's talk about the standards. What attracted you to those particular tunes? Why did you pick them? What was your approach to arranging them for solo guitar? Um, Talk a little bit more about just what drew you to those particular selections.
Yeah, I like the, well, for all of them, like, some standards are more, like, if you think of, All the Things You Are, not to bash that song or anything, but often when I'm playing it, I don't feel it. Like I just, it's like, oh, I don't know, I don't feel it. Whereas these ones, I feel more like I just like the melody and I like the harmonic motion and um, yeah, and like I like Beatrice. It's and Sam Rivers actually was like a very um, uh, like amazing musician. Like he was part of the loft scene in New York and like part of like the new jazz and his that tune kind of is sort of modal. Um, yeah, and it was just like one of those like first modern tunes, but
Mm,
it's not. It's like yeah, it's an old tune, and I just really like it. And then Peace, that one has like a 10 bar form. It's not your typical 12 or 32 bar
mm.
stuff, and uh, yeah, I actually heard that a version by Nora Jones before I actually heard the Horace Silver one. And the lyrics are really beautiful,
Mm.
and just the title for where we are right now.
Yeah, we all
Um,
need a little bit of peace.
yeah, and it's so, and then Alone Together is just one of those ones that I don't really get tired of that one. And as you were saying, it's very like Alone Together. That's what
That's where we
2020
all
was.
are. Yeah.
Yeah, and are now. When I'm arranging them, I just, think about the melody, voicings underneath, and like trying to do substitutions to get something that I'm hearing that's maybe not, yeah. I don't really know how to explain that process without being like really prescriptive about it.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. And I like to do intros and
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
To what
Yeah.
degree are you messing with the standard, and to what degree are you holding yourself to what's already been established? I think this is like something that jazz musicians are always wrestling with. Like, we have these tunes, we have, the real book or whatever that's giving us this particular version of that tune. It's usually kind of a stale version of that tune,
Sometimes it's
and
wrong.
sometimes it's wrong, right? Exactly. And so um you know what are your sources? Like, how did you learn these tunes to begin with? Talk a little bit about that, just like your relationship to the tune, whether it's like a reference recording or the real book, or some lead sheet that somebody scribbled out for you in 2004. Whatever it is, um how much of that original source is something that makes it into your playing, and how much of it is something that you're actively trying to change and work up against?
I don't think I'm actively trying to change anything. Um, I'm just trying to translate what I think it is to the guitar. But like
Mhm,
the melody, so like often I'll learn the melody by ear, and then if I'll either write it out or then look at a lead sheet and kind of alter it to what I've learned it as to be. Um, and another thing is learning the words to songs. So like Alone Together has lyrics,
mhm,
and so does Peace. So yeah, learning the lyrics and then trying to really internalize it so that it's internalized before I go and kind of arrange it. And then yeah, learning the like kind of standard way that people play through them harmonically. And then once I basically just try to learn the tune before I uh, arrange it for myself, my own
mhm.
version. Yeah,
You
I
know
try to keep the melody typically and the form and like I the harmony, I'll substitute it, but I'm not in my opinion, someone might disagree, I don't know. I'm not going way too far out
mhm.
right now because I still feel like a very beginner uh, jazz player.
To
Yeah.
what degree do you embellish the melody at all, from what you originally hear?
I would say I'm keeping it I'm trying to keep it as true to the melody as I can.
Mhm,
And yeah, like when I think about peace, the words are going through my head,
mhm.
so I'm following that. So I'm not
Yeah.
adding too much around that because when you're following words, I don't know how to explain it, but you
Yeah,
just
no, I mean, you don't sing stuff that's not there, right?
yeah. Um,
And talk a little, what about the words to Peace, um, was something that really talk a little bit more about what the lyrics of the song are saying. You know, we're not hearing you say the words on the recording. We could dig for them, of course, but um, like, what
yeah.
is the song about, and how is that influencing the way that you play it?
There's a place that I know where the sycamores grow and daffodils have their fun. Like it's describing this I don't know, the way that I relate to it is that I often go outside into the woods or into the garden to kind of just feel grounded and like at home.
Hmm.
Are like the next words where the cares of the day seem to slowly fade away and the glow of the evening sun. Like I'm like, yeah, I totally feel that every time. That's like where I go to feel
Hmm.
that like peacefulness. It's not for me in the middle of a city or behind in front of a computer screen or like um yeah. And the last line of the song is peace is for everyone. Peace is for everyone. Peace is for everyone.
Mm.
So that's yeah. I mean,
You have the original in your head. You have um this idyllic scene that the lyrics are describing in your head. um how are you translating those images from the tune onto the guitar? I mean, it's already translated in the tune itself as well, but um how does that influence your approach to making this work on the guitar? Are you looking for chord voicings that just give you that sense of ease? You know, talk a little bit more about how the
yeah,
lyrics influence your arrangement.
I would say like it makes me feel something that I relate to. So then when I'm playing it, because I'm able to relate to it, I can feel it and try to express that through my guitar. I don't ever like I guess I don't intentionally be like, oh, a B flat Lydian chord would really sound great. Like
Yeah.
it's more like I find those colors in the chord voicings that match my feeling
Mhm.
inside, but not so much through like a mental process.
Mhm.
It's very, to me, it's just very organic and like natural.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's talk
yeah,
about
and
the
just like,
words for Alone Together too.
yeah,
Um, let's get into, what this song is saying, and, same kind of, why were you drawn to it, aside from the fact that you love the melody, and um that you're attracted to it musically. What do the words say that get you saying, like, yes, this is something that I need to record?
yeah. I'm just gonna cheat here
Go
for.
ahead.
I like the key that it's in to begin with. It's in, well, it's a minor key, but a D minor typically is what it's played in. Um, and yeah, so I'm kind of talking around the point again, but that like statement alone of alone together, it's like I've very much felt like when you're like in a bar or you're, I don't know, out at a gig and you're surrounded by people, but you feel like completely alone.
Mm,
It's like we're all here, but we're all feeling loneliness, but at the same time, you're like feeling connectedness because you're in a room with other people. Um, but yeah, like the first, this one's also a love song, and like the first line is like alone together beyond the crowd, above the world, we're not too proud to cling together. We're strong as long as we're together.
mm,
Um, that's very like to me, it's like a love song of a couple, or but
mm,
in my mind, that can be expanded to like community or like
yeah.
society. And yeah, I think very much this year that that kind of was is just like a reminder, like we all need each other a lot more than we're maybe put like priority for. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I think there are
Yeah,
a lot of things that we all kind of took for granted, and then
yeah,
realized, like, just how much we did, when everything shut down and we were, many of us, confined to homes. And um so I get it. Yeah.
the rest of the song kind of keeps elaborating on that topic, like the just talking about love, like the end. Our love is as deep as the sea. Our love is as great as love can be, and we can weather the great unknown if we're alone together.
Mhm.
So it's just really, a lot of the words are like really poetic and beautiful.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
And so you recorded this album in June,
Hmm.
kind of when we got through the worst of the first wave in most parts of the world. Um, talk a little bit about the timeline, and how this material kind of emerged. How many of these songs, I mean, some of these songs have been, in your fingers for at least 3 or 4 years, because you released them 3 or 4 years ago. What, if anything, came about, like, when, we were all isolating? um just a little bit more history of, like, when some of these originals emerged, especially the ones that are new to this particular release.
Yeah. Um, so before the pandemic, I was actually in New Zealand, traveling by myself. Uh, so to me, I kind of like reflect on this and I'm like, it's almost like I was like practicing being alone for this whole thing. But yeah, I was on a solo trip and just had a like travel size acoustic guitar. And because I was not in places that had very good internet, and I was in rural New Zealand. Yeah, and then I wasn't because I was so living so much outside, I wasn't really like putting in headphones listening to music all the time.
Mm.
I was listening to like some of the birds out there like have really cool songs and stuff. Like I was listening, but I was like more listening to the environment.
Mm.
And then, you know, like started writing stuff with having this like really dry spell of what I was taking in musically. So, um, yeah, I don't know how to explain that. Sometimes when like if we're writing, we'll like listen to a bunch of different stuff and like maybe research and like take ideas from other people or whatever, but it was like
Mm-hmm.
coming from like this void of a break. Uh and so I wrote a couple there and I didn't finish them. I just kind of like started ideas and would put my guitar down and um yeah. And then when I came back from the pandemic, that's when that first month I remember because it was still kind of winter, March. I came back on March 11th and everything kind of shut down March 12th.
Mm. That's what it was here
So,
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just like I was like, "Oh, this is a great time to like practice and kind of get my technique back and stuff like that." And that's where I kind of expanded on like the new ones are inertia, railway spine, hurry up and wait, and southern limbo.
Mm.
Yeah, and I like those were in process and then there was confirmation that I was going to get this deal with this label
Mm-hmm.
and they just wanted they wanted the EP and then 3 jazz standards added to it. And then I was like, well, I have 4 other songs. Can I add those to it? And that's kind of how that happened. Um, so yeah, I kind of finished everything by end of April, and then I had to move. Uh, and then yeah, I came back in March, worked on this stuff. Then I had to move again, and then I moved to somewhere in rural Nova Scotia that had very very poor internet, and so it was just like this. Yeah, it was a good. It was an interesting like experiment experience, and then um, they wanted it recorded, and it was kind of like still pandemic.
Right.
Some studios weren't open. I didn't have gear because I was living like very minimally and was
Mm.
living somewhere that yeah. So finally, when my friend's studio opened in Halifax, I booked some time at end of June there. Then pumped that out and like uh, yeah, we did the 12 songs in like 5 hours, just kind of like live off the floor, so one take.
Yeah.
Um, maybe do a second take and then take the one that you like better.
Right.
Um, and then yeah, and the reason I wanted to do that is because I didn't want it to be very produced. Like I just wanted it
Mm-hmm.
to be raw. And yeah, my thing is kind of like if I couldn't play it in front of an audience, I don't want to record it like that. So I'm
Yeah.
not going to go back and like punch in every single correction.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, and then I had to the mixing and mastering was interesting because I was living somewhere that you couldn't even load an Instagram story. The internet was so bad on the North Mountain. So I would have to like drive into town and use the library every time he wanted me to listen to something or like send feedback or so it was this very like slow dragged out process um, and then finally it finished up and then we sent it off and then it was released in Japan in September of
Oh wow.
2020. Yeah. And then the reason I waited on it was here is because one, I didn't know if I was going to release it here. And then I didn't want it to release it around Christmas time. And just kind of sat on it.
Yeah.
And I think it's appropriate for winter. Like I thought solo guitar, like we're all kind of inside alone.
By the fire,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's that kind of record.
Just like chilled out kind of.
Yeah.
It's not like a summer dance song or yeah. I don't
No.
know.
Yeah.
That's kind of the timeline.
Well, very cool. Sam Wilson, you can listen to her album Into a Heart Part 2 and her other recordings on Bandcamp. And thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me today. And
Yeah.
we look forward to hearing what's next from you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.